I was drafted in 1969, and it was a very surprising thing for me. I thought I had the draft beat. Nearsighted in one eye, farsighted in the other. Homosexual tendencies were checked off. And within a matter of about 15 minutes, my eyesight was not a problem for them. And I was also proclaimed an honorary member of the heterosexual community. And that's a problematic badge for me, but it works. What I want to do is just give an overview of some of the materials, and this is one of them, that turned up in a lot of the GI Underground newspapers. I have studied the GI Underground newspapers. That was the basis of my master's thesis. And then what I want to do is look at the two case studies that I have been looking at over the years, two relatively representative newspapers, one of which I worked on, and which also got me a ticket to Vietnam. And then the other thing I would like to do is provide my views of the assessment of the GI movement on the war itself. And we're going to go through this relatively quickly because I do want to stay on time, and we also want to make sure that people get a chance to chat. Could you get it, please? Here's another one. This was widely used by a lot of the GI papers. Uncle Sam wants you to die, which was the caption, by the way, that went along with this. And the next one, it needed no caption at all. We pretty much understood what that was all about. These were all generated by GIs. This is GI art. And this one, this actually came out of the straight press. It shows the waning support for the war. And of course this was used and reproduced over and over again by the GI papers. Here's another one, my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
I like to tell people that I didn't learn one damn thing about American civics in the public schools, but in 1 year in Vietnam, after 1 year, I really should have been given a master's degree in political science, as we all should have been, because we learned a lot about the United States. Did it? GI anti-war papers, this is my configuration. These are statistics which I have generated. You can add 60 to that number. There were at least 270 of these papers, and they were being published everywhere. Everywhere. And anywhere there were U.S. military personnel, including Iceland, and
yes.
talk about that.
Yes.
Published everywhere. And last night I asked Jim, we were together having drinks over at the hotel, and I said, well, why'd you do this? Why'd you get caught up in that? He said, because I was pissed off. And one of the characteristics of Vietnam vets, at least the ones I run into, is that chip is still there, and I think that goes for the anti-warriors as well, because they did time in the trenches, God knows. The chip is still there. Most of them concentrated in Army, Air Force, but everybody had these going for them, including the Corps, and many of these were done in association with the operation of coffee houses that existed all across the country, sponsored by an organization called the United States Servicemen's Union. U.S. Union? No, it's not, or Association, I forget the acronym. But funded largely by one of the great heroes of the war, a guy named Fred Gardner. And I don't even know if Fred's around anymore, but he had impact. Want to hit it? This is the definitive work. James Lewes, a Brit, wrote a dissertation at the University of Iowa. It has been turned into this book in '03. It is the story about the GI Underground Press. And then, not to be excluded, this is my piece that turns up in a newly published multi-volume set called Insider Histories of the Vietnam Era Underground Press, and it's edited by a guy named Ken Waxberger. Personally, I think these volumes belong in everyone's library, so you might want to check that out at Michigan State Press. Hit it, please. So, Aboveground, Thomas Roberts and Curtis Stocker, two guys in PSYOPs who came back from Vietnam looking for some hell to raise. And like I like to remind them over the years, they constantly got me in trouble. I was a very naive, newly minted soldier who turned up at Fort Carson, Colorado, and these men changed my life for the better. Because I got caught up in the publication of this newspaper called Aboveground. We had an association with the Homefront Coffee House, one of those coffee houses sponsored by Fred Gardner's group. And I wrote under the nom de guerre, Fort Carson GI. That was my byline. Of course, we were infiltrated. All of these organizations were infiltrated. There wasn't one that, well, maybe in Iceland, maybe that. I'll tell you, this guy had his stuff together. But the coffee houses definitely were infiltrated. There's no question about that. And we understood that. The GIs understood that. Some of the civilians had a hard time, believe it or not, understanding that. They got hit, but the soldiers knew. And they did everything possible to destroy us and to undermine our credibility. Went from 69 to 70. Ephemeral publication is the term used for this kind of publication. So it's very hard tracking down collections, and it's very challenging just to count them and try to categorize them. Want to hit it, please? Mm-hmm. So this is, I think this is the very first issue of Aboveground. As you can see, it looked pretty good because there were those of us who worked on this little rag who had worked professionally in media. So we had an eye for typeface that kind of, not all the publications were like that. And both Tom and Kurt had been trained in the Army Journalism School at Fort Harris or something. Place like that, was that it?
Benjamin
And
Harrison?
Pardon?
Benjamin Harris?
Benjamin Harris, yeah. Benjamin Harris.
Indianapolis.
And, yeah, in the great state of Indiana. And so they were accomplished propagandists because that was their work in Vietnam. Yeah?
Probably stepping the line here by asking the question at this point, but what you're talking about, was it just or did it include both volunteers and draftees, or did it focus mostly in draftees that were in this?
Well, I'd like to think that draftees were sort of the heart of the matter because I was one.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to Vietnam, for example, which was 1970, the whole thing had fallen apart. And even guys who had volunteered, and to a certain extent, I could say, especially guys who had volunteered, we were all pissed off because we had figured it out.
Well, the reason I asked was I sort of volunteered in 65, spring of 65.
Mm-hmm.
And the Marine Corps came on campus and they said, you know, take this test and if you pass it, sign here. We promise you aviation training. And I paused for a second, and after panting, I signed. And I was kind of oblivious to all of this, even throughout my, well, maybe in Vietnam it started to change, but not change radically. I didn't start change thinking until years later. So that's why I asked, because what you were talking about, I have no doubt about it, it's not something I experienced.
Well, I'll tell you, there were three, the decline of command started in 69 and then accelerated. There was a rapid decline in the ability of commanders to control us. It became a daily occurrence for people in my unit to simply refuse orders and to occasionally negotiate orders when we felt good about it. But they were not in control of us.
But just to put this in context, the units that we were in, were they combat units?
I was in a medical unit.
Yeah.
And I was very privileged. I was on the South China Sea, far away. I was about as far away from combat as you could get, with the exception of being on one of the aircraft carriers. The people I worried about were other GIs. By the time I got there, we had organized into gangs, and we all had unauthorized weapons. I had a Bowie knife, and oddly enough, a World War II era rifle with rounds that somehow came into my possession. So things were scary there. All right, hit it, please. If you go back and, okay, there's a story behind this. When a soldier was killed in Vietnam, his nearest next of kin would get $10,000, and that's the widow of a fellow who was killed. And she donated some of that money to the operation of Aboveground. So when I was called in to be interrogated by military intelligence, I lied to military intelligence and told them, oh yes, many widows all across the country are giving the $10,000 check to the operation. Right? And I so offended the colonel who was interviewing me that he had to get up and leave the room. He used the word disgusting. Right, want to hit it? And here's another one. They tried to suppress the publication by hassling the printer. And and the printer got really pissed off about that. And because of that, continued to publish the publication, even though he was pro-war.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there were a lot of really interesting decisions made. Hit it, please. Here's another one. This was our atrocity issue, and we started getting into some difficulty with our civilian comrades. We were all young. For the most part, we had no idea what we were doing. So. Keep that in mind. Some of the civilian volunteers we discovered were making up atrocity stories, which was really stupid because there were our authentic atrocity stories just waiting there at Fort Carson. And the thing that we feared greatly was that an agent who had infiltrated us would discover that, and then we would lose all credibility. And that's when we learned that the civilians thought that because they were interviewing everybody coming into the coffee house, that we could not possibly be infiltrated. So that began the split between the two groups. Want to hit it? Here's another one, and let's move through quickly if you don't mind. Here's another one. And no, go back. Okay, sorry, not that fast.
Okay.
Quick on the trigger.
I know it. It's Marine Corps.
These are the various attempts, right? The various attempts, including threats of physical violence. We were all threatened. And see that next to the last one, on-post arson, propagation. An agent provocateur came into the coffee house, tried to get us to torch a barracks building. Because he thought that would get a lot of attention, right? Well, we later found out that guy was an agent provocateur because the company clerk, found all the names of the agents and their make-believe names, and we published those names. And the next day after publication, they were all gone. Okay? This is the home front in downtown Colorado Springs. And as you can see, parking was way cheap in those days. Factions at the home front. We had civil libertarians, people who believed that the war was unconstitutional and that violated the Nuremberg understandings, which we all knew about. We all knew about Nuremberg. And I'll tell you, when My Lai hit, that was a big deal for those of us in uniform, both draftees and regular Army. Because we started wondering, what in the world could happen to us if we were involved in such a thing. So-called radical elements that got defined in any number of ways. Very brave young women showed up as volunteers. They took on the very difficult task of trying to explain to 18-year-old men why they should have some interest in women's liberation and to discover the relationship between the oppression of women here in the United States and the oppression of people all around the world. That was a tough sell, but they stayed with it. And then various countercultural elements. There were a few nights when everybody at the home front dropped acid. Occasionally there was the mescaline night. There was a lot of that going on. Right. Hit it, please. 2 papers with international distribution. The Ally, based in Berkeley, and the very famous Bond, which was the publication of the U.S. Servicemen's Union. Now they had a tough sell too. They were trying to get us to unionize. And they got, I don't think they got much traction because most of us just wanted to be out of the Army. We really didn't care about organizing within the military. So I'm not sure how successful they were, but they stayed at it for a long time. Want to hit it? Here is a publication of the Ally, or an issue. Hit it again, please. Clark Smith, another legendary person who does not turn up in the standard histories, professor of rhetoric at Berkeley. And at Berkeley, rhetoric is one of the strongest programs in rhetoric in the world. So Clark Smith had his communication stuff together. And that's one reason why the Ally lasted for such a long time. In addition to that, this is a group that developed a very productive coalition with veterans, returning veterans. And they respected the returning soldiers because they were smart enough to figure out that the soldiers were bringing knowledge back that they did not have and they could not have. So it was very productive. The Ally lasted for a good 10 years and distributed worldwide. Now get this, the original idea, right, that they had before they started meeting with vets was to encourage widespread desertion. Yeah, that was not going to happen. Then the other idea they had was, you know, we're going to package mobile printing presses and we're going to send them to soldiers in Vietnam so they can publish their own anti-war newspapers, right? You know, we got Marines on the run all the time, right? Moving from one place to another, and in their spare time, right? They're going to be Benjamin Franklin, right? They're going to, and you know, they figured out now, you know, it's not going to work. So they resorted to a very effective distribution system. They started sending care packages to soldiers who identified themselves as potential distributors, and they were dummied up, and they were all sent from phony churches. You know, the Methodist Church of Peoria, you know, kind of very effective. Want to hit it? Here's another one. Hit another one. This is where My Lai is reported in the Ally. Hit it, please. And here's the Bond, right? Bond. And you can see, join the GI's union, right? They had a really good game plan. They wanted collective bargaining. They wanted, let's see, what else? They wanted, gee, there was a, they looked at the officer class and enlisted personnel in the way traditionally we would look at bosses and workers. There was a problem there. Because a lot of the officer class, especially the lieutenants, came from the same social class that most of us did, which is the working class. And so their sentiment really was with us a lot of the time. And I will tell you, in Vietnam, a lot of those lieutenants helped out. They really helped out. And they were in a very precarious situation. Want to hit it? Here's another example. By this time, well, you see the headline, right? Sir, my men refuting in America knew that the soldiers were no longer with the program. Want to hit it? Here's another one. And hit it again. One of my heroes, I would love to run into this guy, Roger Priest. And when we found out in Vietnam that there was a newspaper being circulated in the Pentagon with, yes, right, a Navy guy, right?
Yeah.
One of your guys.
Yeah.
Hit it. So these papers were everywhere, you know. I mean, this was the little rag that was distributed at the Pentagon. Hit it again, and hit it again. Okay. Your military left was a paper produced at Fort Sam, and hit it again. Here's an example of your military left. As you can see, Aboveground was superior in typeface and artwork. Right? I remind Tom Wetzler of that every once in a while, and he uses a phrase that ends with the word "you" when I remind him. Hit it. Here's another one. Okay, hit it. Here's another coffee house. This is the Shelter Half up in Tacoma. Look how young these guys are, right? You know, and most of these guys had, including myself, we had never been involved in political action. You know, we didn't even vote most of the time, or any of the time, really. Hit it. Here's another shot of the Oleo strut. Hit it. Key actions by VVAW. The one down below here, Operation Dewey Canyon 3, Tim was involved in that. And I told him last night, you know, that every once in a while VVAW would do something really cool, like that search and destroy thing across North Jersey. Right. Wow, that was really good. You know, taking prisoners. Yeah, Americans were taken prisoners.
In northern New Jersey.
Were you involved in that?
I was not. I had not joined by that.
Too bad. Well, we heard about this kind of stuff going on in Vietnam, and photos of these guys would be published in Stars and Stripes with captions, basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, would say, you know, these guys are assholes, you know. And our reaction to it was, yes, they certainly are. Right? Hit it. Some shots from the Winter Soldier testimony. And Tim was at this event. This is the event where soldiers returned their medals.
Yeah, actually the guy throwing his medal, I remember very, very clearly. He was standing near me in line while we were waiting. Yeah.
Where was that?
D.C., steps to the Capitol.
It's on the west step of the Capitol.
Yeah, steps to the Capitol building.
April 23rd, 1971.
Our current Secretary of State, and hit it again. And well, I'll hold on this a little bit. This should demonstrate to you how a few people thought about John Kerry. Right? I think we've all mellowed since, or at least I have.
I have.
You see what's going on here. You know, it's and the next one is even cooler. Next one, yeah, there we go. Okay, you're really clicking tonight, you gorgeous preppy. As he's carried on. There's a real sense of social class in these organizations. The vast majority, I think, of the people who belong to VVAW came out of the working class or middle class. That's who we were. And John Kerry is the one who gets the nod to speak before Congress, doing a very good imitation of JFK's accent. Having said all that, I love the guy, you know, I wish him well. He's okay. Hit it? And some of you may remember this. People took over Ms. Liberty.
And that was actually VVAW. Yeah.
Right.
I was not in that either.
Or so you say.
Yeah, right.
Impact of GI movement, right? Basically, the movement generally, I would have to say, and certainly the newspapers, reinforced an already established tendency to resist. Certainly by 1969. 1969, 1970, the command is falling apart. What the newspapers do is signal to isolated GIs that they're not that isolated, that in fact there is power. There is power there. And all that had to happen in one unit was for one guy to refuse orders and get away with it. And that was it. The deal was done. Get it? Some others, newspapers undermine military authority by their very existence. Whenever some very stupid commander would start confiscating these publications, illegal, that got around. in a unit. So by their very existence, they were problematic. Hit it. It told us, about other people who were involved in this, including the Black Panthers, the women's movement, the students' rights movement. So it really did facilitate communication across a broad spectrum. Hit it. And ultimately, I would argue the GI movement really forced Nixon to adopt Vietnamization. You remember that euphemism, right? And ultimately to end the draft. I mean, we were very problematic with the continuation of that war. We seriously undermined battle readiness, not just in Vietnam, but all across the world, including Germany, where it really counted. That's where it really counted. We were in Vietnam so that we didn't fight the Russians in suburban Berlin. That's why we were in Vietnam. And when the American soldiers started refusing orders in Germany, and also started using really good hash, at that point, something had to be done. One hit it. One thing that is sometimes forgotten is that these newspapers, along with a lot of the poetry that Vietnam combat vets wrote when they got back, implicated the U.S. civilian population, as if to say, hey, it ain't just us. You're implicated in this, and you cannot escape responsibility. Probably contributed to some of the negative stereotyping as well. I would say that's part of the downside of it. And I think that pretty much concludes it. Want to hit it? Another one, this was very popular. Hit it again, please. And yeah, the military thought that we were a morale problem. Actually, our morale was quite high. It was very, very high. And hit it again. An overstatement. I can't imagine guys sitting around in a foxhole smoking dope, but I can imagine them sitting around on the beach at Cam Bay smoking dope, particularly after Kent State. Want to hit it again? Here's another one. Bring the war home. That never really caught on too much. I don't think a lot of soldiers coming back really wanted to pick up weapons here. We just wanted to get out. Hit it? And here's another one. Okay. And I think the last one, no, this is good. Bread, not bombs.
Okay.
That's good. That's on a chopper. Right? And then the next one, Sir, No Sir, which is a great documentary. And the next one, they're still at it. Operation First Casualty. Hit it again.
I was in there.
And factionalism rears its ugly head. And among other things, purges a good man like Jim. Thank you.